Morning there, Jim.
Morning, sir. What's on your mind?
Well, I think there's an emphasis to put on the post-Brexit start-up. And I think rather than just imposing on the general public further with hostility of producing more police on that end of the spectrum of, how can I say, data managing, block training the general public, I think Boris and the Cabinet should, personally, I would nationalise the Belfast shipyard that's going through administration problems. I'd nationalise the British steel plant. I'd then look at a green method of injecting energy into the boats produced in Belfast. I'd offer conciliatory measures to the Irish. For every 2 boats built, 1 sold to the Irish at cost, because they're probably lacking a merchant navy also. Then predicting the future boom of trade that will be alleviated from the centralisation mechanisms of the EU. You've got 19 Caribbean English-speaking islands that Boris could be doing bilateral arrangements immediately. Then he could contract Irish fleets to also facilitate the trade coming back from the Caribbean.
Right.
There's a huge boom, potentially managed correctly.
What about the demand issue? Because you know very well, if you buy something online, you want it today or tomorrow at the latest, not in 5 weeks' time, by the time it's been loaded onto a container and shipped across the world.
Unless you're going to 3D print produce from the Caribbean direct, you know...
Well, it can be flown, is my point. It can be put on an aeroplane and flown. If we're going to do that kind of bilateral trade agreement, then we'll fly the goods to and from. We won't put it on a ship.
I don't think it's practical to fly like huge quantities of weight. I think it's more pragmatic by maritime methods.
Fine. Okay. So we need to remobilise a merchant navy to facilitate our trade around the world.
More so, they need to regenerate education across the national state education parameters, because the EU has introduced an academic pseudo-education, and the children now are unaware that they are basically data blocks of information.
The EU have had practically nothing to do with our education system over the last 20, 30 years, Robbie. We've had full autonomy over how we teach our children in that time. So,
can I just say that the transliteration, if that's the instance, what
does that mean? Sorry, I don't know what transliteration means.
It means a way of hacking another person's language that should be a natural defence mechanism from outside influence of subliminal dictation. So in the grammatical sense of English information, you have dependent data block because it's now been upscaled. Originally, it just read grammatically dependent.
I'm quite good at words, but I've got no idea what those words
Well, this is so important because you've also got grammatical independent data blocks. So the independent data block...
independent data block.
That's English.
Yeah, right.
That's English. That would mean that you would be speaking an oral constitution rather than a dependent grammatical, which would be a written constitution. So then, if I may please take you to the Home Affairs Committee, currently headed by Yvette Cooper, she, either knowingly or subliminally, is subjecting the general public to a form of software that can be spoken and use cyber, and it's called scareware. Because she's announced this inquiry, Islamophobia inquiry, and that is an instance of her generating scareware. In theory, in the game theory, if you Google game theory, and apply it to a data block, she's now taken on the role of issuing a fatwa against the society that she's now labelled non-Muslim.
Okay, all right. So I'm off tomorrow. If you if I remember, Robbie, I'll Google it when I get back. Thank you. 20 to 6. Jamoke Fasholas on the way with the breakfast show.